we the people, in order to form a more perfect union. 221 years ago, in a hall that still stands across the street, a group of men gathered and with these simple words launched America's improbable experiment in democracy. Farmers and scholars, statesmen and patriots who had traveled across the ocean to escape tyranny and persecution finally made real their Declaration of Independence at a Philadelphia convention that lasted through the spring of 1787. The document they produced was eventually signed, but ultimately unfinished.
I had not thought of it as a work in progress. I guess I thought about the Constitution as a document that exists, it's static, it's finished, and now we're trying to hold to it. But the idea that here are some ideas that need perfecting, that they could actually be written and the people writing them realizing this is not the end of it, this is where it begins. That's a very exciting idea.
I think we all have to realize that a perfect union is really unachievable. It's the goal of trying to achieve that and working towards it that's the most important part. We're never going to be able to sit back and be like, this is a perfect union, we're all set here, and we're done, because that's never going to happen.
For all those who scratched and clawed their way to get a piece of the American dream, there were many who didn't make it. Those who were ultimately defeated in one way or another by discrimination. That legacy of defeat was passed on to future generations. Those young men and increasingly young women who we see standing on street corners or languishing in our prisons without hope or prospects for the future. Even for those blacks who did make it, questions of race and racism continue to define their worldview in fundamental ways.
We have to be careful that when we say perfect union, that we're not looking for a utopian society, because I don't think that ever exists. And then we go into governments that probably we don't really agree with. But we can seek to respect one another where we're not finding ways to hate one another. And I think that's the perfecting of the union, when we can at least tolerate one another for the sake of being people, rather than demonizing one another for the sake of finding ways of being fearful and divisive.
I have brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, uncles, and cousins of every race and every hue scattered across 3 continents, and for as long as I live, I will never forget that in no other country on earth is my story even possible.
And as he explained that that's who he was, he pictured within himself this very idea of a nation coming together.
I think that God created us like we are because God loved it that way. The problem is we don't love it that way. We'd rather be one people, one color, one race, and one gender. And I think that that's a boring community.
Because I believe that we live in a time where we have the possibility, for the first time maybe in history, to be that nation where people of a variety of race and ethnicities, ages, gender, are able to be a community where there's unity but not uniformity.
Societal problems are so complex that we need everybody's views, and that's where I think race, ethnicity, culture, our worldview, and our own creative gifts need to be released.
What we have seen is that America can change. That is the true genius of this nation.
If we continue doing the same things that we've always done, we continue looking at the past and looking at the past, then we will never find the progression of the future. We will never move towards something that's better than what we currently have.
A significant change is that the conversation is happening. And because he's president, it has enabled a conversation in this country that we haven't had before. That conversation at times is painful, that conversation at times is frustrating.
And we fight with each other about the rules of the game rather than saying, hey, let's look at this and let's change this, let's change those rules.
And if we walk away now, if we simply retreat into our respective corners, we will never be able to come together and solve challenges like healthcare or education or the need to find good jobs for every American.
We need people who are willing to hang in over a period of time. I'm talking generational work here, and people who are willing to make the long commitment. And without that willingness, we won't get very far.
The debate can easily go back into its old patterns pre-speech. So his speech is no cure-all.
In the 2 years, we've had an African-American professor arrested in his own house, and we've had a swimming pool that didn't allow people of color to swim, and we've had a Supreme Court justice who had to deal with language about her language. And these things continue to mount and go on, even though we say we have passed a milestone.
And I think the absence of conversation around race makes us stay where we are until we talk about it, and then we move a little closer, and then we stop.
I don't know if we've given each other language, and I don't know if we give each other permission to use language that helps us get further.
If we share our stories, our hurts, our struggles, our pains, our dreams, our inequities, I really believe that we have shared values that would live out and inspire us to create the world that we want to build together.
That's why I'm really excited about the idea of conversation. The conversation says, you and I are going to spend some time together, we're going to kind of get to know each other, and when I mess up, and I will, because I grew up in my environment, not yours, when I mess up, you'll know me well enough to say, oh, you shouldn't have said that, or here's a better thing to say, rather than make a judgment about me because I messed up.
What would it look like if we became a nation where we respected other people, their ideas, their values, their traditions, that we weren't trying to melt them, which was the old way, but we were able to say, how do those go in parallel?
But I have asserted a firm conviction, a conviction rooted in my faith in God and my faith in the American people, that working together, we can move beyond some of our old racial wounds, and that in fact we have no choice. We have no choice if we are to continue on the path of a more perfect union.